Welcome to Constitutional Law, Winter 2022. I'll be your professor, Professor Jason Leggett. I have been teaching at Kingsborough for over 10 years, and I mostly teach this class and the American legal system, also called the courts or the judiciary class, if you're interested in taking that in the spring. My work builds off my experience having graduated from law school, working in firms, doing some legal writing, but I'm mostly interested in what's called sociology of law or socio-legal studies, where I'm looking at how different actors within our society conceive of the law, how they use it, how they react to it, and I'm most interested in how disempowered groups or powerless groups use the law or rights talk or these kind of larger ideas of legality in order to overcome injustice. I am the first in my family to go to college, and I went to community college before I went to the transfer university and then on to law school. I'm happy to talk with any of you about that journey, or if you're interested in going to law school or another transfer college, I can give you some advice on that as well. I have a course website for this course that I maintain, mostly just in case Blackboard, if it goes down, or if you just need to have that backup just in case you're having trouble logging in, or if you lose access to Blackboard for any reasons, you can go to this website at jasonmleggett.commons.gc.cuny.edu, and then you select the 66 course. It says fall right now, but I'll change that a little bit later. I also have a personal website at jleggett.commons.gc.cuny.edu that gives some of the background about my research. I also have a YouTube channel where I post videos about class content. That's under the lectures playlist. That comes from a bunch of different courses and some other courses I've taught at Barnard, at Columbia, for example, and then also talks that I've given. And so they might not be exactly the same thing as what you're studying in this course, but you might find them interesting and they might help you think about how to study law in a different way. And then I have an Instagram account if you're interested in that. And then if you want to email me, I prefer that you use the Kingsborough email so that we can keep it within the Kingsborough system. The main learning outcomes for this course are to learn about how the property first constitutional narrative, which is not something that a lot of people learned in elementary school or in high school, but that you'll learn why that reinforces social exclusion based on race, gender, and class. You'll learn about broken windows theory in this class about policing and how that represents a dominant cultural view of how society should be organized and how that leads to the detriment of minority representations through punishment and the definition of crime. You should be aware through this class that white Anglo-Saxon Protestant views are overrepresented in judicial opinions, and that these court cases influence how all Americans think about rights, social control, crime, and liberty in one way or the other. We're going to study the problem of homelessness, and so you're going to remember that homelessness is a process of racial capitalism plus gentrification plus displacement and then criminalization. You're going to see how this cycle works within the system. You'll want to think about how legal narratives describe a double-edged sword. So a sword that has two edges, it cuts one way, it defends the other. That both reinforces the domination, but it also provokes resistance, and you'll want to see why that's important. And then finally, you're going to study how social institutions influence how we tell stories about legality, constitutions, and social change. And in particular, we're going to focus on education, family, religion, and I said education there twice. I think that was family, religion, education, and the economy. We're using Blackboard right across Kingsborough, and so you're probably used to that if you've been coming to Kingsborough already. If this is not your first class, if you're having trouble, please email me. But if it's a technical issue with Blackboard, you need to email the CUNY help desk, and that is in your student handbook. It's on the kbcc.cuny.edu website, or I can provide the link if you're having trouble. It's pretty straightforward, so everything's in course content. I put, the do this first says there, then I give you an extra credit folder if you want to start on that. You can earn up to 30 points extra credit by doing all 8 readings using a hypothesis software. And then I just kind of organized it into PDFs where it says week 1 work, week 2 work, etc. That's also where you'll find the final exam at the end. And then for those of you who are going to be using your cell phone or a tablet, when it opens up in the app, you have to push it one more time. There's like 3 little dots in the right-hand corner. You got to push those again, and then that will open up the PDF. For those of you using your desktop, you'll just click the little where it says PDF here in blue, right below each weekly tab. So the assignments are based on the readings and the activities that are provided in the PDF. So then you do those, and then you complete the assignment. The assignment is a Google form. And then it's better if you do those earlier in the week, right? So ideally you do that on Monday, but don't stress out. If you have to do it over the weekend, then you have to do it over the weekend. It's no big deal. But do please understand that if you get behind, if you submit your work later, that means that I'm going to be posting your grade later, right? So that's kind of not a punishment, that's just the reality of the situation, right? I'm going to be grading work each week, and so if you're a week behind, then I have to grade that week's work plus your late work, and so you're obviously going to be dealt with after I work with the students who submitted their work on time. So it's just kind of an incentive to just try to get your work on time each week, but you're not going to get punished or penalized or get less points if you submit it the next week. I always accept student work, right? So up through the term. So even if you fall a few weeks behind, you can still catch up. It's important to me that you're able to complete the work because that's how learning happens. A brief note about the Google Forms. Each week you'll see here, there's the assignment. You click the form, you're going to answer some questions. Those are going to relate to the readings and the activities that you did. A tip: it's best to refer to those readings and activities when you're answering the question. Another tip is do not copy and paste from the internet. It is unbelievably obvious to me when you do that, and that is technically cheating. It's plagiarism, and you can get in a lot of trouble for it. If it's a problem, I will email you and tell you that you need to stop it. You got to cut it out. But the second thing is those answers are terrible answers. I'm sure you might have gotten away with it in other classes, but those top Google searches are not intelligent answers. And they usually aren't answering the question I asked, and they're usually not asking it in the context of the class, meaning that those answers on Google didn't read the readings and they didn't do the activities. And so they don't usually make any sense. And they definitely don't make sense compared to the work that your fellow students do that don't do that. And so it's, again, blatantly obvious when you do it. It also is not a very good idea, right? Because then you're not really learning anything. From time to time, I have a workbook that you'll see here. I'll ask you to look for things in certain places and do a search. So I'm okay with you finding things outside of the class. What I'm not okay with is you literally copying and pasting answers after doing a Google search. The other thing to think about here is that when you push the submit button on the Google form, you'll see it will say your response has been recorded, or at least that's what it says on my computer. It then is transformed or translated into a spreadsheet for me. And so you'll see here, it's got the timestamp. It tells me when you submitted it, and then it puts your responses. So you don't need to check and see if I got it. After starting in the second and third week, you'll see your weekly grade, assignment grade. So getting to grading, you have weekly assignments, 10 points possible for each of those, and so that's a total of 70 points. And then your final exam is going to be 30 points. There's 3 extra credit options, and so if you do 3 discussion board posts, it's just 1 discussion board, but if you do 3 posts, you share 3 things, and you respond to 3 of your peers, then you'll get up to 10 points possible, depending on the quality of your answers. Extra credit option 2 is a pretty straightforward 5 to 7 page research paper using APA citations of at least 3 academic sources. You can get up to 20 points for that. It's double spaced, 12 times New Roman font. You do it as a Word document, PDF, or a Google Doc. And the instructions are in week 1 in that PDF there. And you've got 2 different paper options. The third option is what I mentioned earlier, the annotated reading using Blackboard hypothesis. That has 30 points possible because there's 8 readings. They're the same readings you'd be doing if you don't use hypothesis. But if you do use hypothesis, I want to give you extra credit because you're going to be annotating, showing me that you're doing the reading basically, and then alerting me to anything you don't understand or things that you find relevant. You can use the annotation feature, and there's some instructional videos that I provided as well on how to do that. And if you're not sure which of these you want to do, right, you could wait a couple weeks. But again, there's only 6 weeks, so try to decide whether you want to do the extra credit fairly quickly. Now, I've kind of organized this slide so you could see these are kind of everything we're doing in the big picture. You're going to be doing it obviously one at a time, but this is kind of the whole thing. So I've got a presentation that you'll watch later in the class about the 3 narratives of legality, and that's kind of the interpretive scheme or the way that we're understanding this class. We're going to be looking at the problem of homelessness so you can better understand the relationship between the criminal justice system, the legal system, and society at large, and what that means from a sociological point of view. Here's some 4 cases that are going to be relevant to this study, and then there's going to be these articles, these readings that help you get deeper into the theoretical and practical aspects of the legal system as it operates in society. And I've made a little workbook for you that kind of takes you along and gives you some additional prompts and ways of thinking. And this is not graded, it's not required, but I think it could be helpful for some of you. And I'd recommend everybody use it. It's also helpful to prepare for the final exam. The final exam is going to be pretty straightforward as well, right? It'll be long answers. It'll be mixed. There'll be some other multiple choice kind of mixed in. But the main point here is you want to be able to apply what you've been learning this whole semester or this whole term, and really answering those 6 learning outcomes. You'll show me that you've understood what these things are. And then finally, just to think about this, right? 6 weeks can go by very, very quickly. It's almost like a sprint. So email me if you need anything. If you fall behind, let's try to work on figuring out how to get you caught up. I'm happy to Zoom with you most days before 8. I'll use the announcements feature in Blackboard to keep you updated. I'll also provide additional resources from time to time as they kind of come to me or as it feels like they're needed in this class. So make sure that your email that's linked up to Blackboard and that your school email is working properly. And try to check your email from time to time, right? Because you don't want to miss the updates. That's also where I'll obviously let you know when it's time to take the final exam. The final exam will not be timed. It'll be open. It's an open book. And so, you'll want to make sure that you're keeping up with the announcements, either by going into Blackboard and looking at the announcements section, but you got to make sure you click that, right? Because if there isn't a weekly announcement for that week and you want to look at the older announcements, then you got to actually open up the tab. And then after week 2, you'll be able to check your grades in the Blackboard grades section. The next thing you need to do is just look at week 1 work, open up the PDF, and then you'll start with a video. I think it's about 20-25 minutes. Then there's a website that you can click on. The first website, the segregation map, is actually brought by the New York Times. If it pops up asking you to have a subscription, you can actually log into your Kingsborough account, and then you have a subscription access to New York Times through that. You can just Google CUNY New York Times subscription, and then you'll see how to activate that if you're having trouble. Sometimes it lets you look at the map without it. Kind of guess it depends on how it's feeling that day. The thing after that is I give you the option right away about the workbook. The workbook is where you'll have the reading about the introduction to racial capitalism, which is kind of a really important theoretical concept that you need to understand so that you better understand how constitutional actually works in our society. And it might explain a lot of the questions you've had about why there's inequality or why there's unequal access to rights. And then you'll finish the assignment through the Google form there. And then in that first document, I give you some notes about extra credit, general policy about work, et cetera, et cetera. So, you want to make sure you read that and give yourself enough time. So thank you all for registering, and I hope that this is an enjoyable experience. Sorry, I'm losing my voice. And that you'll be able to do as well as you possibly can. And just let me know if you need anything.